there's actually a fourth scene that lives only in the Matrix and that doesn't appear in Love Story. And I can see in your eyes, you're a Matrix man. So what's the scene?
Yeah.
It's the scene where Neo and Trinity go to Agent Smith headquarters. They're armed to the teeth. They're wearing these awesome black leather jackets.
Yeah.
And they become like one unit, kind of like this one larger whole, kind of firing, moving together in this larger sync of beauty and undulation and eros, right? So that's a WHOLEmate scene. There's no scene like that in Love Story because they don't have a WHOLEmate relationship. And that is one of the most embodied, alive, wondrous scenes in all of the Matrix series. You're like, oh my God, they are hot, right? But hot in this beautiful, it's not pornographic hot.
Yeah.
There's no body parts revealed. They're completely covered, right? But they are hot. They are beautiful. They are eros. They are whole. They are alive. They're in this larger wholeness. First off, in the embodiment, that's what it feels like. So I want to first just access a direct pointing out instruction for what that embodiment feels like. It feels like that scene in the Matrix. And maybe, I don't know if this is possible, in the Middle East, I did a kind of like an Oprah version television show, and we would analyze movies, and we actually bought movie clips from Hollywood because they didn't think that this particular Middle Eastern place was a market, so we got them for $500. In the United States, it's hard to play a movie clip because of rights, but maybe in the show notes, I don't know if that's possible.
We can play a 3-second clip.
Yeah, even a 3-second clip of that scene.
Yep.
From the Matrix where they're kind of walking in together.
It's on the screen right now.
It's on the screen.
It's on the screen right now.
We can see it. That's the embodied sense. Now, for a couple, let me say a couple of things, and it's like so the right inquiry, and I'm just, if I can be, we get to fall in love with each other. I'm just so delighted with you and delighted to be in your space. It's crazy exciting. So let's say we're raising kids. You would think, oh, that's WHOLEmate. Not necessarily. Why am I raising those kids? Am I raising those kids to get them through preschool and make sure in preschool that they get accepted to the right university to incur enough student loans so they can do the same thing again and again through the generations? Well, that could be WHOLEmate. But if I'm raising those children as these, indigo children of the divine, if I'm raising these children to embody, right, a new dimension of the universal love story, if I'm raising these children to become more God to come, if I'm raising these children to participate in the covenant between generations and standing for justice and goodness and truth and beauty, then I'm raising those children in a field of value. I'm raising those children in a shared story of value. So then when I look at the children are not my WHOLEmate children, they're my WHOLEmate children. So whenever a couple, beloveds, look together, and whether their children are a project, whether their children are their own transformation, but not simply for their own kind of psychological equilibrium. No, I actually experience that my transformation, our transformation, is the transformation of the whole. Right? My story is not dissociated from the larger narrative arc of cosmos. The narrative arc of my life, my personal story, is chapter and verse in the universal love story. So then, as we go to experience our transformation and we go to deepen our love, we're actually deepening the fabric of love in reality herself. So the embodied sense, right, is rooted in our intention, meaning how am I focusing my attention? What's my attention? Is my attention on my own personal fulfillment, or does my personal fulfillment participate in the fullness of cosmos? Now, if I can give you just a tender gift, my friend, from above the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus walked, and where the great mystics of Hebrew mysticism who formed the Renaissance and who influenced Ficino and Medici, at the Florentine Platonic Academy in Florence that we talked about earlier, that was convened by Cosimo de Medici. So above the Sea of Galilee, there was a great mystic, a great interior scientist named Luria, Luria, Luria. And he has this beautiful formulation in Aramaic that I'll say in English. He says, when a couple does an action and they say, for the sake of the higher union of all the split off parts in cosmos, we offer this action. The upper waters and the lower waters, the masculine and the feminine, earth and sky, line and circle, Shiva and Shakti, Rama and Sita, right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, right? In other words, I'm offering this action. We're doing this podcast for the sake of the holification of reality. We're doing this podcast for the sake of causing union in all worlds above and below. I'm listening to this podcast not just because I want a quick hit of personal fulfillment. No, my quick hit of personal fulfillment is so I become more full, and then my fullness overflows into the currency of Eros that is Cosmos herself. So the second I'm doing it for the sake of, it all changes. For the sake of the larger whole, I'm a WHOLEmate. For the sake of the larger whole. Let's go kind of a little wild for a second, okay? Because here we are. So there's another work which we'll talk about at a different time, different place, called the Phenomenology of Eros. It's one of, there's like 6 vectors of work. That's one of them. And the Phenomenology of Eros is a 12-volume set. Let's not go down that road now. About the nature of sexuality, which tries to transform sexuality. So we're doing deep work in economics, deep work in relationships, deep work in, metapsychology. So sexuality is one of 6 areas, which it always needs to be. Sexuality models the larger field of Eros. It doesn't exhaust it. But in this work, we talk about 7 levels of Eros, or 7 distinctions of desire, or 7 tastes of sexing. And it's something, right, Christina and I, my beloved partner, worked on for a decade. And the 7th level is called bodhisattva sexing. And bodhisattva sexing is when my orgasms become prayers. I'm sexing for the sake of the whole. I'm pouring my energy into the whole. You get that sense with Neo and Trinity. And in that scene in Matrix 2, it's both completely intimate and personal. It's complete soulmate. It's completely intimate and personal. And it's for the sake of the whole. And there's no split between them. In other words, in WHOLEmate, the personal and the cosmic become one. That's the wholeness. I don't feel like my story is split off. So I'm sitting with my beloved, and the embodied sense that you're beautifully asking about, you can do it by saying, this action is for the sake of the whole. You can do it by simply looking in each other's eyes and then taking a moment and looking at the horizon together. In your deepest interior, we have a shared vision. We're in a shared story of value. And again, tears in my eyes, my brother, it won't work. I say this, there was a moment in life where I worked extensively with couples, and it's an enormously important thing to do. And if I wasn't committed to the great library, I'd spend my life doing it. And couplet is so beautiful. And most couplets don't work. This is between you, me, and God, right? In other words, most couples stop having sex after a certain amount of time, meaning they lose their intimacy, they lose their eros, right? They kind of, the family becomes familiar. They're no longer surprised, right? They're lost in this kind of dead-end story. And so then let's be polyamorous. With all due respect to polyamory, there's a lot of blessings and holiness in polyamory, but I think for most people, most of the time, monogamy is the way to go. I just want to say, for most people, most of the time, monogamy is the way to go. But monogamy is a practice. So monogamy used to mean WHOLEmate. And that was enough. Then we said, oh, no, that's not working. Let's go for soulmate. Didn't work. The polarity disappeared. The vision disappeared, right? And you actually have a world in which and let's see if we can get this clear. It's so deep. The basic structure of reality is a relationship. Marital relationship of whatever kind, right, is the basic structure of reality. So what does it mean if those are all breaking down? Right? And if you look at the statistics, and I've looked at them quite carefully cross-culturally, right? Marriage as a thriving, living institution, right, is collapsing. And in the Western world, we said, let's heal it by moving from WHOLEmate to soulmate. But the soulmate world, right, has become the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail is a leaking bucket. And no one's willing to say it out loud, which is why couples are left in this cycle, the spiraling cycle of hopelessness, because we move from therapist to therapist, right? And no one addresses what's our shared story of value? What's our shared mission? What's our shared vision? Right? What's the shared horizon we're looking at? Now, it's not that we're looking at a shared horizon and we're kind of storming the barricades and we're alienated from each other. No. We look at the shared horizon, Neo and Trinity, and we turn to look at each other. And then we walk into Agent Smith's headquarters, right, dressed to the nines, right, armed with the weapons of peace and creation and wonder and joy and radical amazement, and we create a world.
That word create, that just hit my soul.
Yeah.
Whoa. So you love that episode? You'll love the one on the screen. Click it and enjoy.